Hello and welcome to episode 66 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. I'm your host, Anna Manning, and today we're going to be talking about mimicking confidence versus authentic confidence. A client told me recently that in the 90s, most of the training she got was about how to stand correctly and how to speak right and how to dress and how to kind of present yourself so that you could look more confident. And the subtext of that was in her particular industry, she would be in rooms full of men. She still is mostly, but I think it was even more prevalent then. And I listened to this with interest because I wasn't in the workplace in the 90s, unless you count a paper round, which for the purposes of today's podcast, I don't. I didn't really think about how to present myself properly, so I looked confident on my paper round. Although I did have to contend with quite a few scary dogs, so maybe it would have helped. I don't know. But it got it got me thinking about how very often when clients come to me or people come to me to work with me, they kind of assume that the thing that I'm going to be helping them to do is mimic confidence better. And I think the reason that people think that is possibly because, like this client said, in the 90s, most of the training was about how to speak right and how to project your voice and how to dress and how to do all of these things, which in essence were designed not to make you feel confident, but they were designed to make you look like you were confident. With the subtext of that being, if you already felt confident, I'm guessing that you wouldn't have been wondering about how to look confident. Because if you actually felt confident, looking confident is a non issue. And as I said, so many of my clients think that possibly I'm going to help them to mimic confidence better or to kind of cover up a lack of confidence rather than the actual work which I do with people, which is working on what's on the inside. So feeling confident instead of masking the fact that you aren't confident by mimicking some kind of confidence. And I realized that quite a while ago, a particular client that I'd worked with, who is a partner in a law firm, she's senior in her firm. I asked for a testimonial after I'd worked with her for 3 months. And she gave me this testimonial, which really speaks to this podcast episode that we're doing today about mimicking confidence. So she said, I'd lost confidence in myself from a strong belief that I needed to play a role at work, totally ignoring my achievements to date or the fact that I'd got to where I am from being me and doing it in my way. Anna helped me recognize that to find my inner confidence once again just by being myself. And then she goes on to say, very honestly, if I am honest, I thought coaching would be about teaching me how to play a role at work, to make my mark in a male dominated environment, how I should act, phrases I should use, the power suit I should wear, fake it till you make it, etc. But it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, it was all about accessing what I already had and learning to trust myself again. Now, that's her quote, but she sums it up beautifully and probably better than I could. And I think it's worth thinking about whether, and you're listening to this podcast, I guess, because you want to feel more confident at work, but don't really know why else you would listen to it unless you're my mum, and I'm pretty sure even she doesn't listen to it. So if you want to feel more confident at work, most people, and maybe you do too, have concerned yourself more in the past with how to kind of mask the fact that you're not feeling that confident and to mimic confidence. You might call it like this client did, how to play a role, how you should act, phrases you should use, the power suit you should wear, fake it till you make it. And this client is not unusual because, as I said, a lot of people think that's the kind of work that I do with people. That is how I'm going to help them. But when I actually thought about that, I was like, if that was all I was going to do with a client, then honestly, paying me would be completely unacceptable. I hope that none of you are paying anyone to uh, help you to do those things, because you can find the information on Google. And to be honest, most people are already masters at masking the fact that they're not feeling as confident as they'd like to be, and kind of mimicking confidence in order to survive and in order to get promoted, etc., in their workplace. Most people, and maybe you, are already doing a brilliant job of that. Often someone will say to me, do you know, nobody would know that I have a confidence coach, because they would think, oh, she's confident, she knows what she's doing, she's got it all together. But my clients are already really good at their job, right? I don't help them with that. They're already successful. I don't help them with that. What I help them with is what's going on the inside. I'm not here to help them or you mask lower confidence by mimicking and by playing a role. I am here to help you to go a bit deeper than that, to help you to take a moment, even if it's while you're just listening to this podcast, to take off the mask and say, what is actually happening inside? What's actually going on with me that I'm not feeling that confident about this, or that I'm not feeling that confident in this situation? Because there's always going to be stuff that we come up against where we're really at the edge of our comfort zone, or we feel like we're at the edge of our ability. And we'd all like to feel like, oh yeah, I'm super confident at all times, and that's just the way it is. But I really don't think that's probably that realistic for anyone. So I think the reality probably is that, at least in part, or even at least in just some situations, maybe everyone is playing a bit of a role. Maybe everyone is masking not feeling as confident as they'd like to by kind of mimicking and by pretending and by kind of faking it till they make it. And maybe there are times or situations or environments where you've really just got to do that because you've got nothing else. Then go for broke. But if you really want to grow your confidence, then you've got to look deeper than playing a role. You've got to look deeper than mimicking confidence, because that isn't helping you to feel more confident. It's just helping you to mask the fact that you're not feeling that confident right now. And like, imagine if you had an illness, you can mask the symptoms, but unless you treat the cause of the illness, you're still going to be sick. And like with confidence, you can mask the symptoms by playing a role and by faking it. But you're still going to have this problem. It's not an illness. I don't want to compare it to that. But you're still going to have the root problem, which is that lower confidence, which is creating all of those symptoms. So instead of spending your time, and I think probably wasting your time, thinking about how to mask and how to mimic confidence, let's just get right to the heart of the problem. Let's just get right to the root of the situation and ask, what is it that's creating low confidence? And I'm endlessly trying to not campaign, that is not the right word. I'm endlessly trying to lift the lid on this for people and to show them, okay. And I'll add a caveat at the beginning here. Some people are in a terrible, hideous, toxic environment in which they would never feel comfortable, they would never feel confident, even if hell froze over. So that's one thing. But if you're not in that kind of environment, if your environment is generally okay, if the people around you are generally supportive and you generally know what you're doing at your job, that's where this work comes in. And as I said, rather than trying to spend your precious time and your precious energy and even maybe your money working out how to mask the fact that your confidence isn't as high as you want and working out how you can mimic confidence, instead, I think you'd be better served actually going to the root and seeing what's creating low confidence in the first place. And if you've been to one of my Grow Your Professional Confidence classes, you probably already know, because in those classes, and I will leave a link to this in the show notes because it's much easier to visualize than it is to talk about. But in those classes, I walk people through the high and low confidence cycles. And these are basically a summary of the patterns and the habits and the behaviors that I see when someone's confidence is lower and when somebody's confidence is higher. And if you're going to stop masking and mimicking and actually get to the root of what is going on that your confidence is lower, I invite you to click into the show notes, take a look at that low confidence cycle, and see how many of those habits and patterns you can identify with. Most of the people who come to me who want to grow their confidence are stuck in a low confidence cycle. And it can change. You can end up in a high confidence cycle. But first, you have to stop masking and stop mimicking and stop pretending just for a moment and instead decide, okay, I'm actually going to take the gloves off and I'm going to hold up a mirror and I'm actually going to go to the root of this problem and say, what is actually going on that is creating this low confidence? And a really easy way of doing that is to just look at the visual of the low confidence cycle and say, okay, what are the habits and behaviors that I can see that I am engaged with or I am using in the workplace, and how might those be impacting my confidence? And some of those might be, am I being self-critical? Am I doubting myself a lot? Am I demanding perfection from myself? Am I giving myself a really hard time if I make a mistake or an error? Am I refusing to see any of the negatives? Refusing to see any of the positives, and just looking at the negatives and giving myself a hard time for that. Because that's the kind of environment that a low confidence cycle creates. And if you're stuck in one of those, it doesn't matter how much you're able to mask and mimic, and doesn't matter how many times you try and use the right body language or project your voice, it's still just masking the problem. Because if you're still stuck underneath it all in a low confidence cycle, it is coming back to bite you in the ass at some point. And I'm in the process of making a quiz which will help you to determine whether or not you're stuck in a low confidence cycle, and then give you some hints and tips as to what you can do to start moving from a low confidence cycle to a high confidence cycle. And I think it's going to be pretty cool, and I think it's going to be really useful, but that isn't actually made yet. So keep your eyes open from that, and I'll tell you about it on the podcast when it arrives. But to give you an example of this thing that I'm talking about, I actually saw this post on LinkedIn today, and it was about executive presence. Now, you can't see me because I'm doing air quotes. And it said, do you want to be a more effective leader? Executive presence is a vital leadership skill. Done well, it means that people will follow you and take action because they want to, not because they have to. When you exude EP, as in executive presence, you'll be more visible and more credible, making you the obvious choice for the next interesting opportunity. Now, obviously, I'm reading that in a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way, but I just thought there is another really obvious example of I don't feel that confident about being a leader. Therefore, I think, right, what do I need in order to mask it? The fact that I don't feel very confident, I know what I need. I need executive presence. It's like, no, you don't. You don't need What does that even mean? Honestly, like, I know this is my industry, but there's so much like fluff and nonsense, I tell you. Executive presence is something that you think you probably need if you're not feeling as confident as you want to. Now, there may be legitimate examples of where executive presence is the thing that somebody needs, but I'm guessing that executive presence is again looking at like, how do you hold yourself? How do you conduct yourself? How do you talk? How do you do this? How do you introduce yourself? How do you do all of that? It's like, if you're actually feeling confident, authentically confident, you don't need to worry about that kind of shit. You don't need to worry about executive presence. Your presence is enough. You have to think about executive presence when I would suggest you're not actually addressing the root of the problem. And here's another example. A lot of people come to me saying, I'm not very confident presenting. And I'll say, okay, like, tell me what's happened, what's going on, what do you think you need? And they're like, oh, I think I need like presentation skills. It's like, okay, there are presentation skills and there are presentation tools that people use, like tell people things in threes and all of that kind of thing, right? That stuff exists. And I don't do that stuff. But for most of the people that I talk to, this idea that somebody needs these presentation skills is most of the time just masking the fact that they just don't feel very confident standing up in front of people and talking about the thing it is that they know well. They don't need presentation skills. They need to know how to manage and handle themselves when they're nervous. They need to know how to be supportive of themselves instead of critical before they start presenting. They need to know how to believe themselves and support themselves instead of doubting themselves constantly. They need to know how to lower their standards instead of demanding perfection at every turn. And they need to know how to give themselves a fair assessment and a fair appraisal of what actually happened in their last presentation without tearing themselves to shreds. That's what they actually need. That's what will actually help them. And yeah, maybe there is presentation skills trainings that are very useful, but again, I see it as something people think they need generally to mask the actual problem, which is that they just don't feel as confident as they want. And the way to actually solve that root problem is to work out, like I just said, all of that stuff which is making you feel less confident. So you can feel more confident doing the presentation. And then maybe once you're feeling good and you're feeling confident, there are other skills that you can build on. Brilliant. But I wouldn't start there while you've still got that root problem. Another way I see this showing up is, and often people will tell me this, oh, do you know, I need to feel more confident. I think I need to be more like X person. I need to be more like Tom, for instance. That's what confidence looks like. And most of the time they'll pick someone who they don't like at all. So they really don't actually even want to mimic them because they're like, in order to be confident, I need to act like that guy, but I don't actually even like that guy. So I just have to be stuck here feeling not very confident. See, it's either I act like Tom or I can't be confident. Not true. Again, thinking we need to act like Tom, for instance, I don't even know who Tom is, but thinking we need to act like Tom is just another way of masking and mimicking confidence. It doesn't actually address the root problem, which is that I think that I can't act like me. And that if I act like me, everybody will know that I shouldn't be in the job, or that I'm not cut out for it, or maybe my temperament isn't right, or I'm an introvert. And so, again, when I work with people, it's a case of taking that mask off and saying, hang on, Maybe you can act like you. Maybe you are just great. Maybe you are just fine, nerves and all. And when people can actually start to embrace that, not embrace being like Tom, but embrace being more like themselves, that is when we're able to really look at what's going on and help people to treat the root problem instead of just putting a mask over it and faking it. So as I've been doing this podcast and as you've been with me, and thank you if you're still with me, is there anywhere where you might be kind of mimicking confidence to mask the fact that maybe you aren't quite feeling it at the moment? Or maybe you aren't quite feeling it in relation to this particular thing. Have a think about that. And I encourage you to click in to the show notes and have a look at those high and low confidence cycles if you haven't already looked at that. And if you have already looked at that, go back to the stuff you put together from that How to Grow Your Confidence class. And think about, can I be me, unmasked, feeling confident enough to just be me? Not mimicking, not masking. Feeling authentically confident. And even in the moments where I don't feel authentically confident, I can still be me. And I don't have to mask or mimic because I feel confident in what I know and what I do. And if there's a moment where I don't, okay, I'm a human. We think we have to mask and mimic so that nobody will know. But what if that just isn't true? Could you take the mask off this week? Could you take a step towards creating actual authentic confidence instead of putting any more of your time and effort into mimicking confidence, into executive presence or presentation skills training or dressing for success or faking it till you make it or projecting your voice? All of those things can be good, but none of those things get to the root of the problem. None of those things will address the issue if you're stuck in a low confidence cycle. So think about that first before you go spending your precious time and energy and resources on how to fake it. Think about how you could reel it instead. All right. That's all I have for you this week. And if you want to come and coach privately with me, there is a link in the show notes where you can click through, book an appointment to talk to me, and I will help you to determine what is at the root of your lower confidence, and therefore what work we would need to do together in order for you to stop mimicking and stop masking and feel actual authentic confidence. On that call, I will outline all of that for you, and you can decide. If I think I can help you, I'll tell you. And if I think I can't help you, I'll tell you that too. All right. Have a good week, everybody. Bye.